All right, Cynthia, here's one I don't get. President says Cohen is a liar, but the president's attorney, Giuliani, says Cohen and Trump are telling the same story about the Moscow project. How does that work?
It's a little he went that away game, and it's not going to work, is the short answer. First of all, if he was lying when he was making the statements outside of Congress about how there was never a Russian deal, and the president knew he was lying, and he just let him lie, that's a problem in terms of misleading the country. And remember, keeping in mind, as we talk about all these lies, Article 1 of Nixon's impeachment was misleading the country. So if the president let Cohen lie, that's misleading the country. If now he's telling the truth, then we have a different problem, and that is Don Jr. apparently went into Congress and said there was no deal. Cohen never reached out to, he didn't think Cohen reached out to anybody in the Kremlin, and downplayed the whole thing. So then now what happens? Now Don Jr. has lied. What's going to happen because of the Cohen plea is that all the transcripts from the House Intel Committee are going to Mueller, which the Republicans have been hiding in the basement. Now they're going to have to get in their happy little car and take those over to Mueller's office. And when they read those, we have a whole new avenue of discussion. And let me just say one thing about the Russian deal. The Russian deal, the president could do. He could not lie about it because he's misleading the American. He misled the American people.
But he wasn't under oath.
It doesn't matter. The Article 1 was not about Nixon being under oath. Article 1 was about Nixon misleading the country. So there's two tracks. One is, what is the right thing for our country in terms of impeachment? And the other is criminal. He was misleading the country, number one. And number two, if it's true about the BuzzFeed article that they offered a $50 million bribe to Putin, hello, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So it can be an illegal deal depending on what shakes out about the $50 million bribe.
Okay, Jeff, to Cynthia's point, all of this sounds awful, but none of it actually came to fruition. And President Trump or his team said these things while he was on the campaign trail, not while he was president of the United States. And Trump says he can do anything he wants while a candidate. Is that true?
No, Stephanie, you have to look at the overall picture. First of all, Cynthia's point was a good one. Just the offer of a $50 million apartment to Putin would violate the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And the question is, how many co-conspirators do you have? You have to look at the fact that you had the Corsi and Stone connections to Assange. You had Manafort meeting with Assange this week. That came out in The Guardian. You have Manafort today in front of the judge where Mueller will detail where he lied and what he lied about. And so if you're looking at the overall picture and you're looking at the links, when the Assange leaks started, the WikiLeaks started, where they got the information from, it was the Russians, a sworn adversary, and you have Trump, Mr. Number One, with the Russians back to June of 2016, trying to coordinate a deal with them, and then making political statements about the Russians and favorable political statements during that time, and the American voters just did not know about it.
All right, and we should note that Julian Assange denies that Guardian report, and it was Felix Sater, the one who said that they offered this or sweetened the deal that in building, if they were to build Trump Tower in Moscow, Putin would get that $50 million penthouse. We have not heard that confirmed from anyone in the Trump camp. At least Washington Post has reported it, and others. Michael Cohen is seen as an existential threat to President Trump. He wasn't someone who was just with him on the campaign trail. This is a guy who knows the ins and outs of Trump's operations for over a decade. How do you see it?
I think it's not a good thing for Donald Trump to have Michael Cohen wandering around able to comment on all of the deals and all of the unsavory
Trump's calling him a liar
behavior.
and a loser.
And back to this $50 million penthouse offer.
Somebody
that
didn't
has been
offer you
reported.
that?
I know. I would really like one, Steph. Yeah. I think a $50 million penthouse would be great, although I don't know if I'd want it in Moscow, quite frankly, these days.
Fine.
But the $50 million penthouse, an early report of Rex Tillerson in the Oval Office, one of his first meetings with Donald Trump brought up that he wanted to do away with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And Rex Tillerson explained to Donald Trump, no, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act is actually in our national interest. We don't want this kind of behavior happening. We don't want American businessmen and women going around the world and behaving in this way. But this was an interest of Donald Trump, a man who really doesn't have that many policy interests per se. And it was one of the first things that was a priority for him when meeting his new Secretary of State.
Rex Tillerson, who did know Russia and Putin well during his time at Exxon, but when Rex Tillerson took the job at the White House, he sold out of all of his shares of Exxon. Gary Cohn and Dina Powell did the same with their position in Goldman Sachs stock, as have other presidents and their business interests. And President Trump didn't do that and still hasn't shown us his taxes. All right, Jason, bottom line, all of this seems to be that the president kept the public in the dark about his ambitions with Russia during the campaign. And if it is true that his business team was talking to Russia about the potential Moscow deal between January and June, just a couple of weeks later is when President Trump officially secured the Republican nomination. And that is when the GOP suddenly watered down their position of how we are handling protecting Ukraine against Russia. It is easy to draw the line,
Look, all of this is, can we start playing the Law and Order music now? Because this is the part where, exactly, this is where people are actually going to get in trouble. This is where Don and everybody else can get in trouble, because this is what caught Papadopoulos. This is kind of what got Flynn. When you start, you can do these deals legally. But number one, no one has these deals and only talks about business, right? Like they weren't just talking about adoption in the Trump Tower meeting.
No, they're very concerned with adoption.
They were primarily concerned with kids and children. But you're not just going to talk about real estate. You're going to talk about policy. You're going to talk about the military. So we know that these meetings didn't have one singular purpose. The second thing is all of this lying to Congress. This is what's going to end up putting people in orange jumpsuits. That's the problem. That's why Don Jr. is concerned. That's why other business partners are concerned. And that's why everything that Cohen has said has been so important. It's not just the 10 years, but you sort of mentioned this before. 70 hours of interviews. That's like 3 seasons. That's like more than 3 seasons of Billions. That's a lot of conversation to be having. And in no way, given that we also know that Cohen kept tapes, that in 70 hours, he hasn't essentially ratted out every single person in this administration that was cutting deals on the side. That's where this becomes a legal problem. I do think for the first time that there really will be people who end up in handcuffs in this administration, not just political problems, but legal problems as well.
And I will tell you, I have watched hundreds, if not thousands, of episodes of Law and Order. If Jack McCoy is sitting down with you for over 70 hours, you got a problem.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.